Just wanted to hop on here and maybe talk a little bit about my hostel experience so far. I've traveled in over 8 countries and 9 including the US, so I have a little bit of knowledge about the general happenings, what to look for when you're booking a hostel for the first time, and tips that'll make your trip smoother overall. My first time staying in a hostel was actually in New York when I was 19, so I had traveled around a little bit, but this was my first solo trip, and it was after a study abroad experience that lasted 3 weeks in Barcelona, and I decided to do something kind of spontaneous in a city that I was familiar with. I'd been to once or twice, and I thought that would be a great jumping off point for trying hostels and solo traveling for the first time. I stayed in the Upper West Side, which looking back probably wasn't the best decision because I did waste a lot more time on transportation than I should have, and it could have been in a nicer area, but you know, it was fine for a first experience. And I traveled a lot differently than what I would now, so I picked a 4-person female only dorm, and I basically went in the hostel and out, and that was the only thing. I didn't participate in any of the group events. I didn't go to the communal areas. I couldn't even tell you what they looked like because I think I just walked right past them to my room every time. So I didn't really get the social concept, or I didn't get to experience that my first time around, and I've definitely changed how I travel, especially staying in hostels now. So last year I did a bit of a solo jaunt around Europe, and I started in Paris and then went to Dublin, Edinburgh, London for a couple days, and finished in Rome where I met up with my family. But I've also stayed in a couple other places around France and Barcelona later that year, so I can give a couple tips and talk about how I traveled throughout that time. For hostels that have the option of female-only dorms, that's usually always my personal choice. I just feel like you don't have to worry as much, which I know is unfortunate in this day and age, but it's the truth. So if you're a solo female traveler, that's the first thing that I typically look for, and I feel like the most comfortable dorms are usually the smaller ones. So 4-person, 6-person, 8-person. In this case, 4-person female, 6-person female, 8-person female dorms are usually the most comfortable and the most safe. But as opposed to that, I love being social in hostels, so you want to look for places that have communal areas like kitchens, lounge areas, rooftop bars, that kind of thing. Also, a good sign of hostels that have been around for a little bit and kind of stabilized their position are ones that have activities for the guests most of the week. So you can do walking tours in the morning to kind of get to know the city that you're in or the local area, which is always helpful. This is kind of only pertains to cities because they are the ones that have the most walkability. But yeah, other than that, sometimes they have cooking classes, dance lessons, language lessons, all kinds of things that you can participate in to get to know other people, travelers from around the world, which is super fun. And on that note, I would say take advantage of the hostel offerings as best as you can. So if you do the bar crawl, you do the salsa classes, you do the cooking classes, the Spanish lessons, whatever you plan to do, it's a great way to meet people and you get to learn more about the local area as well. Also, when looking at hostels, you have to consider the kind of mindset that you want to go in with. So if you're going to a city for the first time and you're looking to do more exploration and kind of want to do your own thing, maybe you'll stick to yourself more and just, you know, see people in the mornings and in the evening. So let's say you get up early in the morning, you have an activity planned, you spend the whole day exploring, and you come back later in the evening. Usually they have bar crawls, which is really fun for different areas of the city, and you get to know more people. They're a little bit more, you know, loosened up and fun and ready to meet other people at that point. So I think that's definitely a great way to talk to other strangers and kind of come out of your shell a little bit as well. And if this is your first time solo traveling, staying in hostels, you might want to grab a group of friends to kind of explore the area so that you don't feel as lonely or intimidated by the circumstances. So my best tip would be just start saying hello to everyone that you see, especially when you set your bags down in your dorm and you get comfortable. Maybe talk to your bunkmates or head out to the social areas and the common areas and start talking to people, seeing where they're from. Everyone else is there for the same reason, so they're going to be more welcoming towards you and want to say hello as well. In that case, if you're not afraid to meet other people and you maybe are looking to have a social experience, I think more beds equals more friends. So sometimes they have rooms with 10 people, 12, and it goes all the way up to 36. Not saying that it's the most comfortable experience, because you probably won't get a lot of sleep, but you will get to know a lot of people and have some fun too, I'm sure. Continuing on with the tips, if you are staying or traveling somewhere for a longer period of time, I would say look for hostels that have laundry services available. So typically a washer plus dryer service will cost you between $5 to $10, I have found, mostly in coins of the local currency, which usually you can exchange at the front desk, or sometimes they have coin machines there as well. And there was some instances where you had to download an app which you can use, which was actually very helpful, because then you could just upload it straight from your credit card. You didn't need any sort of local currency. And if you're planning to do laundry, I would say try and find a good time to set aside that time to be able to do it. So typically the best times are early in the morning when no one else is awake and hungover, and maybe mid-afternoon when people are at lunch, and possibly early evening when people are getting ready to go out or to get dinner, so that they're preoccupied and their focus is elsewhere. It is unfortunate that you do have to set aside some of your exploring time, your adventuring time to do laundry, but I would say try and do it not on the weekends, maybe earlier in the week when the hostels are typically less full, and that way you can get it done quicker and you don't have to worry about your things getting stolen or taken out of the machines and left somewhere else. It's very much like a dorm experience, like a US college dorm experience. If you stayed in a freshman dorm, you'll know what I'm talking about. Next tip would be consider location and how much you want to spend on transportation. So sometimes the hostels will be a little bit more if they're near the city center, if you plan to stay in a city. I'll find that it's actually worth it to pay a little bit extra up front, and that way I don't have to spend more on local transportation and time. You know, time is a important thing when you're traveling and seeing new places, and you'll waste a lot of time commuting into the city if you stay somewhere further out. Also, you'll tend to meet more people in the ones that are closer to the city. It just makes socializing easier. You can go out to places, grab a drink, you know, do the walking tours, go to the bars later at night, and come back without having to travel too far or worry where you are. So going off of that and continuing on with the tips, do your research beforehand. So I always use Hostelworld as my platform to book hostels, even if they have a cheaper deal on the website sometimes. I feel like this is easier to kind of make sure you get the free cancellation deal. You have a backup in case you need, if anything goes wrong, you can talk to their company and go through them as opposed to going through the hostels themselves. And you can read all the reviews that other travelers have left when they've stayed at the hostels, and that is how you determine where you're going to stay. So listen to the reviews. Honestly, people will tell you if the place is dirty, if there's mold in the showers or in the beds. That's always something to look for. You want cleanliness, hygiene, and like I mentioned before, the communal spaces. So if they say there's no communal spaces, it's a little bit quieter. Sometimes that's nice if you want a comfortable, quiet experience. You plan on doing things by yourself, not really socializing. Otherwise, you want to look for a kitchen or like a common area, some kind of game room, arcade, rooftop bar, things that I mentioned already. So another thing the reviews will tell you is how helpful the staff is. If they're unfriendly to guests, you know, people of certain places, that's always something to watch out for. So if you're staying somewhere where English isn't the local language and they're not really willing to help you, to communicate with you, then that's something I typically turn away from. Other tips I have for first-time travelers, I would say pick out your outfits that you're going to wear the night before so that you can kind of set it up, and that way when you get up in the morning, you're not scrambling around underneath your bunk or in your locker trying to sort your things and waking everybody up who may still be asleep or hungover from the night before, let's be honest. And that way you also have the motivation to kind of get out of bed and go places in the morning, because sometimes you wake up from traveling, you're too tired, and you end up wasting the day in bed, which, hey, if you need the rest, I mean, it makes sense. But otherwise, it's less disturbing to the other guests this way, and you don't have to worry about what you plan to wear for that day at that time. You can think of it beforehand. Same goes for travel days. So if you're heading to the airport or another city early in the morning, I would say pack all your things the night before, except for maybe what you're going to change into, and have everything ready so that you're not doing the same thing, scrambling before your flight. That way you don't have to waste time and you have everything sorted already for you. Another thing that I use to stay organized is a shower caddy. Actually, hold on, I have one. Like this one actually. So you can fit your towel and your clothes that you're going to change into, all of your toiletries in the little pockets. I got this from Target for like $8 to $10, so not bad at all. But it's really helpful. You put it over the hook in the shower door. That way you keep everything off the floor, or the little benches that they have, so you keep it more sanitary. And it's just helpful to organize all your things so you don't have to move it every time you take a shower in one of the hospital showers. While we're on the topic of things that you should bring with you to hostels, earplugs are my #1 thing. I mean, even if you're a sound sleeper, there's probably someone who's going to wake you up in the middle of the night. They're moving around or they're snoring, which is always a fun time, or they're turning on the light, which along with that, bring an eye mask if you're sensitive to that and your hostel doesn't have curtains. On the note of sanitation, I would say always bring an extra pair of like flip-flops or sandals to use as shower shoes. Even if they say they're clean, you never know who's been in there and what products they could have used on the floor that you may interact with, have allergies to. And I also typically travel with a microfiber towel, which is a lot thinner but has a high absorption rate, so that way I don't have to use it to take up too much space in my suitcase, but also it's quick drying, which makes the whole process more streamlined in general. You'll also likely need a lock to use for the locker storage, and you can either rent those or purchase them at the hostel front desk, which is usually included with the surcharge, or you can bring your own, and that way you know the code, or you have a key that can turn it, and you'll always have that with you, so you don't have to worry about losing it. Even if you do, you won't have to pay the extra fee. It's just easier that way. Also, you should have some sort of outlet to match the international plugs, unless you're traveling that has the 2-pronged ones like the US. I believe you can get the global outlet adapters on Amazon for like 20 bucks or less. I've found them in Target as well, or CVS or Walgreens probably has something similar in certain areas. Back to laundry, and another thing that you should bring, you can bring an extra pillowcase to use for sanitary purposes, and then when you have some laundry that you plan to do, you can put it in the pillowcase to transfer it to the laundry room, so your stuff doesn't go everywhere and you have a more sanitary option when staying in places that may be a little sketchy. Packing cubes are another great thing, especially if you have a locker that opens from the bottom, so you can kind of organize your stuff in there when you arrive, so that way you don't have to take everything out at once. You can kind of just pick and choose which things you want to look for, and it doesn't disturb the other guests. It doesn't ruin your whole system that you have set up. It just makes everything easier. Going back to the eye mask and the main light problem, if you can avoid it, I would say use your phone flashlight when you come in late in the evenings or early in the morning. That way you don't disturb other people. It's just more courteous in general, which I always try and be as courteous as possible when staying in a communal space, because I know people have different routines, different schedules. They may be arriving, you know, late at night, early in the morning as well. So you don't want to disturb their time, and that way you're not ruining their experience as well. If you want to go in a season where it's maybe not quite as busy, I would look for shoulder seasons in the country that you're staying in, so like the off season. So if the main time to visit is during the summer, so June, July, August, usually like early June or late May is always a good time to go. The weather is still usually pretty nice, but not as many people and the prices are lower. Same thing with September. Most places now, the warm weather stays all the way through early October, so you'll still get a summer experience, but on a low budget. And I think that's it for hostel tips that I can think of at the moment. So I'll also include my blog post where I wrote about how I traveled all over Europe with Hostel World and where I went, where I stayed. I have the different hostels linked on that page as well to check out. So yeah, thank you for watching.